This. It's all good. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Thank you all so much for coming. A few months ago, Moshe ran by the draft schedule with me. My name is Becca Levy. Professionally, I'm the Farm and Sustainability Director at the Boulder JCC. I love supporting the work of Colorado Jewish Climate Action as much as I can, personally and professionally. And so Moshe came to me with, some of the subjects that they were preparing for this conference and said, what are we missing? And, there were great sessions about different aspects of decarbonization and renewable energy. And I said, okay, but what about natural climate solutions? And so we put together this panel. When I'm excited for this panel. When we partner with and support nature, we can form a relationship that supports both the natural world and ourselves through these tumultuous times. The effects of climate change that we are seeing on the extreme weather are scary. However, there are ways that we can work with nature to help the local flora, fauna, and ourselves be resilient. I've seen firsthand as a farmer that when we nourish the soil, the fields are more productive and stable, and we are less at risk when there's extreme drought or heavy precipitation. I'm excited to have the opportunity to learn from and connect with our amazing panelists to hear more about how to support and work with the natural world to create resilience in the face of climate change. Our speakers today work in the Boulder and Denver city government. We have Liz Cohen is the Climate Adaptation and Resiliency Manager for the City of Denver's Office of City Climate Action, Sustainability, and Responsibility. Lauren Abram serves as the Forestry Program Coordinator for the City of Denver, and Caroline Petterson is the Nature-Based Climate Solutions Fellow with the City of Boulder. Our program today will begin with a brief Dvar Torah from Rabbi Eliot Baskin, who serves as the chaplain of Shalom Park Nursing Home. A Dvar Torah is a short teaching and will serve as our invocation for this program. Then our three speakers will each present for 10-ish minutes, and then we will have time for questions and answers and discussion at the end. Rabbi Baskin, would you please come up?
Thank you so much, Becca. For a short Dvar Torah. That's why they wanted a short rabbi. So the other day I was at a rabbinic council meeting and I saw one of my colleagues and I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "The world is on fire." And I looked at her and I said, "Yes, but we are the firefighters." In the parasha that we read yesterday, Bo, it talks about the 8th and the 9th plagues. The 9th plague was the plague of darkness. And according to the Torah, everyone in the Nile area was immersed in deep darkness, except for the Jewish people. It says in the homes of the Jews, it says there was or, there was light. And I think of that today when I see all of you and all of those young people here as luminaries. So despite the darkness, we bring light. So my message, be the light. Ta-da.
You have to press it one more time? No? First, we're going to invite up Caroline Petterson, who is the Nature-Based Climate Solutions Fellow with the City of Boulder. Caroline was born and raised in Colorado and has a passionate has been a passionate climate justice advocate for over a decade. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies from UC Berkeley, she joined the City of Boulder's Climate Department as a fellow with the Nature-Based Climate Solutions team. Her work is sponsored through a AmeriCorps program called Civic Spark, which pairs fellows with local governments and nonprofits to expand their capacity to address resiliency and sustainability.
Great. Thanks, Becca, and thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone, for coming as well. I'm excited to get us started on this topic that is really meaningful to me. So let's get into it. Becca, I think, teed me up really well for this in her opening remarks. So usually when we discuss the causes of climate change, these are some of the images that first come to mind. We have like smokestacks pouring emissions into our atmosphere, these endless traffic jams in our cities, and then oil and fracking wells extracting fossil fuels. But I want to ask you if this tells the full story, and hopefully show you that while fossil fuel emissions are certainly a major driver of climate change, there's another critical piece that we often overlook. So land degradation has led to massive amounts of soil carbon loss, contributing actually 20% or more of all human-caused carbon dioxide emissions. And this isn't just about what we're putting into the air, it's about what we're doing to the ground beneath our feet. So when we clear forests, overwork agricultural land, and strip away natural vegetation, we're not just losing these beautiful landscapes, we're releasing stored carbon and destroying nature's ability to help regulate our climate. And this degradation then creates a devastating cycle. As we lose soil health, we also lose water retention, and this can lead to desertification. So the water and carbon cycle are super interconnected. Oh yeah, is it hard to hear me? And so we're now seeing a dangerous shift. Natural areas that have historically acted as carbon sinks, which are places that capture and store carbon dioxide, are becoming carbon sources instead. These are just some recent headlines that I pulled, showing examples of these traditionally reliable carbon sinks around the globe that are now becoming carbon sources. And these aren't just isolated incidents, it's a fundamental shift in Earth's natural systems. So these headlines, we have about the Arctic tundra becoming a source of carbon dioxide, the Amazon rainforest, and forests around the world. So when we think about the problem in this limited way, the solution that follows is simply replacing our energy source. And yes, solar panels, wind turbines, and electric vehicles are crucial parts of the solution, but we can't limit our thinking to just transitioning our energy sources. The problems we are facing require a more fundamental transformation in how we interact with our environment. So I like this diagram. It shows three forest states, and it's something we talk about a lot is deforestation and how that releases carbon dioxide. But I like that this includes the third option, which is a young regrowing forest, which is beginning to draw down carbon dioxide again. And I think that this just demonstrates that nature actually has a remarkable capacity for renewal when we give it the chance to heal. This is another image that I like to show. It's actually from a ranch in Mexico. So on one side is property that is managed using holistic land management techniques, and the other is not managed using those techniques. And you can actually see that the rain clouds are raining on the side with the holistic land management. So when we restore natural vegetation and healthy soil systems, we can actually influence local microclimates. And this creates this positive cycle where plants retain water, increase soil moisture, and that supports more plant growth, which attracts more rainfall and stores carbon. So we can actually begin reversing desertification and restoring these natural water and carbon cycles. And according to the IPCC, which is kind of the leading authority on climate science, natural climate solutions can provide more than 1/3 of the mitigation needed to limit warming and stabilize the climate. So for many of us, embracing nature-based solutions means shifting our entire mindset. A common way of thinking in the Western world positions humans as a dominating force over nature, but another recognizes that we exist as part of nature's web. So I like this. It's a very simple image, but kind of shows the shift in mindset that needs to happen. And I think it's important to recognize that nature-based solutions and all these ideas are not new, although they're being embraced more in the Western world. Indigenous peoples have long understood this relationship, and their knowledge systems offer really crucial wisdom for our path forward. So if we expand our understanding of the problem and the solutions to include this movement of restoration and repairing our relationship with nature, and I think that we can be more successful, include more people, and just create a more beautiful world. And just to ground us in the reality of climate change, unfortunately, we know that things will only get worse in coming years, and climate change is here and now. These numbers are from Boulder. So in Boulder, we historically experienced about 5 days over 95 degrees and 16 high fire risk days. And we're already seeing double the extreme heat days and more than 7 times the fire risk days. And just to call out some of the climate disasters that have happened and that we're seeing more of these type of disasters like the Marshall Fire and the 2013 floods that were very devastating. And yeah, like I said, unfortunately, we know that at least some warming is going to continue. These are projections under a moderate emissions scenario where emissions peak in 2040 and then decline. But we can see that the average year in the middle of the century in Colorado will be warmer than the very warmest individual years that we've seen so far. So the average will be warmer than the hottest years that we've seen. And the North Front Range, which includes Denver and Boulder, is actually projected to experience the highest temperature increases with a median estimated warming of 2.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. And if you know about the climate targets, 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees Celsius is what we're hopefully trying to limit warming to. But if we follow a moderate emissions scenario where emissions peak in 2040, we will see about 2.5 degrees Celsius here in Colorado in the North Front Range. And then on the right, there's this table that's quite scary, showing the estimated changes in these climate threats. This is specifically for Boulder, but I think applies to the whole Front Range. You can just see that there's a huge increase expected in our extreme heat, our fire risk, the number of extreme precipitation events, and then, of course, the annual number of drought days. So how can we make our communities resilient to all of these increasing threats? I'm going to argue that each of these challenges require solutions that work with, not against, natural systems. And I think we can intuitively recognize what landscapes will do better under climate change. So on one hand, on the left side, I have showing more of a conventional landscape with lawns that require lots of maintenance and watering, very little shade. And then on the bottom, there's a beautiful tree-lined street that's going to provide a lot of shade and stormwater management. And on the right side is a before and after picture I found from a house in Colorado showing this diverse native plant garden, which requires less water and provides habitat and cooling and all this natural infrastructure. So these aren't just beautiful landscapes, they're also resilient ones. In Boulder, we've done heat modeling, which has shown that in some areas, tree canopy is reducing temperatures by as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit on our hottest days. And we are working on expanding these benefits to areas with lower amounts of tree canopy. And I think we'll hear more about the awesome tree canopy work that's happening in the Front Range. Another aspect that we work on that I wanted to mention to show kind of the power of healthy ecosystems for resilience is our mosquito management program. Where we are showing that managing wetlands for biodiversity rather than using lots of chemical controls is actually highly successful at managing West Nile virus, which is a disease that has come to Colorado in the last decade or so and is transmitted by mosquitoes. And we'll probably see increasing amounts of vector-borne diseases like this due to climate change. So our program that is actually supporting the health of the ecosystem and focusing on increasing predators and biodiversity that naturally control mosquito populations is actually showing that it's more successful than applying lots and lots of chemicals that kill the mosquitoes or try to kill them. And we have established this program called Cool Boulder because we recognize that a lot of this work has to be done by residents and business owners on their private property. So here I have kind of our mission statement, our website, which has a lot of information, and our 3 action areas that we focus on. So pollinator pathways is our biodiversity work. We're working on lots of native plant gardens and getting folks to transform their turf or asphalt into these diverse landscapes. Connected canopies, because urban tree canopy is super important. And then absorbent landscapes is kind of encompassing all of our work around soil health and stormwater management and things like that. And we've grown to have over 40 community partners, including the Boulder Jewish Community Center, which I'm so happy that Becca invited us to speak here today. So all of these partners are doing amazing work, and I highly recommend that you go to our website and look at all the partners if there's a specific area that you're interested in, and connect with them. And then just a few quick little examples of things that we're doing to kind of ground it in real world action. One thing we do is we host or co-sponsor sow bag workshops, which is a really cheap and accessible way to grow native plants from seed. You just need a Ziploc, some soil, and seeds. And there's a lot of organizations that give away seeds for free. And once the plant grows, then you can put it in the ground. Last year in the summer, we launched the Youth Community Forestry Corps, which is a program that employed youth to care for the urban tree canopy, mostly through watering. And they also collected heat data that we're going to be using, like on-the-ground heat data. And they learned all about how to collect that data and some of the analysis of that. So it was a great professional development program for them. We had it bilingually, and a lot of the youth were Spanish speakers. We had about 10, and we're going to be expanding it this summer as well. And then we also host some what we call community resource specialist trainings. So this is just opportunities for community members to come learn and become resource specialists so that they can go out into their own communities, into their own neighborhoods, and share this knowledge and start their own projects. So we have one focused on tree care, tree planting, how to tend trees, especially tree saplings. And that's like a couple days usually, or it can also happen in one full day. And then people become part of this network of tree tenders, and they share the knowledge with their neighbors. Then we also have a pollinator advocates program where folks learn all about our amazing native pollinators and native plants and how to make habitat. And that's an in-depth summer program that we offer for free to about 20 people every year. And we now have over 50 graduates of each program who are out in their own communities doing amazing work. And this is a picture of a pollinator garden that was put in a manufactured home community in Boulder. And then to end, I have some contact information, and I just want to, and this is a photo of the Boulder Jewish Community Center, which has an amazing rain garden out front. Maybe Becca can talk about that, but I'll just say that the choices we make in our own yards, our neighborhoods, and our city can make a huge difference. By choosing to partner with nature, by restoring ecosystems, rebuilding soil health, and reimagining our urban landscapes, we can create communities that don't just survive climate change, but flourish in spite of it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present, and I'm really excited to hear from our other speakers. And again, please feel free to reach out with any questions or just to chat.
And this one, oh, sweet, okay. Thank you so much, Caroline. And yeah, as a Boulder JCC, I think we partnered early on, especially with my excitement around soil and absorbent landscapes. But I personally have learned so much through the community connections of Cool Boulder. And if you're interested in actually making your own, or a sow bag, Repair the World is in our vendor fair right now. And the project is to do a sow bag for actually the farm at the Boulder JCC, because we're looking to plant more native pollinator plants. So that is actually happening here today as a direct result of Cool Boulder work. So thank you. All right, and now I'm excited to introduce Elisabeth Cohen. Elisabeth is the Climate Adaptation and Resilience Manager in Denver's Climate Action Office. Prior to this role, she was a scientist at the University Corporation of Atmospheric Research and taught classes remotely at Texas Tech University. Liz worked on climate adaptation for the national parks and at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. She has a master's degree in public affairs at Princeton University, a master's degree in meteorology from the University of Utah, and her bachelor's is from Earth Systems Science from Cornell. In her free time, she enjoys spending time skiing in the mountains with her family and doing yoga with her turtle. Thanks, Liz.
It's true. I have a turtle that is very friendly and always crawls under me when I'm doing yoga. It's very strange. Nice to meet all of you. Thank you so much for attending. You all give me so much hope being here. So I wanted to share my pronouns, Liz Cohen, she, her. I'm the Adaptation and Resiliency Manager. If you are interested in connecting with me, you can scan this QR code and it connects us. So it'll be at the end too, if you want to connect. Part of being resilient is having connections and community connections, and so I'm going to encourage that with all of you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Denver's Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency. We were established in 2020. One of our goals is eliminating climate pollution, investing in clean energy and resiliency with a focus on equity. And the mayor says, and I agree, the climate crisis is solvable. Together, we are the ones to solve it. So all of you here, working with us, we're gonna solve this issue. So there are many different teams within CASR, that's our nickname for the Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency, because it's a mouthful. My team is the Adaptation and Resiliency team, and we grow plants in our hands, so that's why that's our symbol. I think that's really funny, but I like it. There's also an Outreach and Engagement team, an Environmental Justice team, Energy Transition team, Workforce Development team, High Performance Buildings and Homes, Sam's a part of that. Woohoo, that's Sam. Sustainable Transportation, as well as Zero Waste and Circular Economy. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Climate Protection Fund. We have dedicated funding to work on climate action in Denver. It brings in about $40 million a year. It is based on sales tax. We have a 0.25% sales tax in Denver, and so that sales tax goes to our office to do all this great climate action work. Over half of that money goes directly to benefit Denver's most climate vulnerable people and neighborhoods. And we also have a very strong commitment from our community that we should be doing this. 71% of Denver residents reported being somewhat or very worried or somewhat worried about climate. Recently, just this past week, Mayor Johnston announced climate resilient goals for Denver. He said clean air and clean water should be a guarantee for all, no matter where you live. We are steadfast in achieving our 2040 climate goals and building a climate resilient future. One of these goals is cutting carbon pollution by adding 2,000 heat pumps. Heat pumps can both heat and cool, so I just wanted to let you all know that because it's a common misconception. It just moves heat around in a very environmentally friendly way. EV chargers and solar arrays in homes, businesses and nonprofits. So another goal, which is really the nature-based solutions, part of this is nature-based solutions, is preparing for a climate-resilient future by planting 4,500 trees in Denver neighborhoods and reducing municipal water usage by 20 million gallons. So we are committed as a city to make Denver more resilient. Resilient to what? Caroline said some of these things that we're working on, extreme heat, wildfires, drought, severe weather, and air pollution, as well as vector-borne diseases too. And resilient for whom? This is part of, I think, part of the reason why I do this and I care so much about this is that our most vulnerable people are at risk from these hazards. That includes people who are elderly, children, people who are unhoused, disabled or have underlying medical conditions, people who are socially isolated. That's where we're talking about building community and being there for each other, checking on our neighbors. When there are disasters, usually the people that respond first or can save you are the people that live right next door and are right in your neighborhood. So being connected is really important. Occupations that may have be more at risk are people that work outdoors, those who are indoors without AC, for example, when there's extreme heat, and low-wage workers. So we have a map similar to Boulder of Denver's heat vulnerability. And the areas that are darker red are those that are most vulnerable to extreme heat. And there are neighborhoods that are least vulnerable to extreme heat, like in this picture here, East 6th Avenue, has lots of trees. But if you've been in parts of North Denver, there's barely there's barely any trees in those areas. And on a hot day, just walking under a tree is like, relief. We know that Denver's heat is not spread equally, and the vulnerability to heat is based on things like environmental conditions, like whether or not you have big trees, health, but then also socioeconomics. And we recognize that a lot of the areas that don't have trees are the same areas that were redlined. If you look at these maps, they're very similar, right? So some of these areas have historically been marginalized and continue to be. So we're working really hard, especially in these neighborhoods, to improve their access to nature and nature-based solutions, including trees. So there's lots of benefits to urban trees. They reduce energy costs. It actually reduces domestic aggression and violence, having forests. Neighborhoods with increased canopy experience less crime. The shade, as you mentioned, can cool cities up to 10 degrees. Reduces air pollution, improves property values, reduces cardiac disease, strokes, asthma, and protecting biodiversity as well provides habitat for more than 80 species. So there's a lot of different benefits that you might not think about when that squirrel makes the nut fall on your head from the tree. It happens in my back patio a lot. Okay. I love our tree, though. So we have a bunch of different projects that we've been working on in the climate office in Denver. One is our community tree planting initiative. As the rabbi said, it's good to plant a tree before the Messiah, right? Then the Messiah will come. Very important, planting trees. So we've been planting trees on private property, including schools. We've been planting, especially in high heat neighborhoods. We good? Can everyone see okay?
This is too thick. I need to find something that's not as high.
Oh, okay. Sorry, everybody, if you can't see my slides as much. Okay. Oh, you can't see me? Okay. Hi, everybody. I do have a short torso, so it's nice to see y'all. Okay. Since July of 2020, over 1,700 trees have been planted and maintained in Denver. There are thousands of residents who have been reached through our canvassing work. So we have community groups who are knocking on doors and helping to build community in Denver as they're planting trees. Am I blocking folks from seeing this now? Okay. So what's to come? We have funding through the Urban Community Forest Grant. Crossing fingers as I say that, because it's the Inflation Reduction Act funding. We are planting, our goal is to plant 3,000 trees on private property over 5 years. We are engaging and planting at 10 heat vulnerable Denver public schools. And we have 3-year establishment care and free replacements for any of the trees that don't survive. So I'd love to stay connected, as I said, to all of you. My QR code is that little black box up there, but there's a lot of other ways that you can connect with our office, and you can come up to me afterwards. I'd love to chat with you. So thanks so much, everyone, and look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Liz. And so now both of our city speakers have mentioned that number of that trees can actually cool the air around us by 10 degrees, and that it's been measured in both cities. So that, I feel like, is very profound. Thank you. And now we have a forester, a city forester, to speak to us. This is Lauren Abram. She is a forestry program coordinator with Denver's Office of the City Forester. With over 7 years of experience in urban forestry within Colorado's Front Range communities, she has studied and completed research on the impact of trees in urban settings and has held nonprofit and governmental positions running various tree planting and greening initiatives. She is passionate about sustainability and dedicated to collaborative efforts to bring equitable tree canopy and green space to communities. When she's not out enjoying Denver's parks, she can be found hiking in Colorado's mountains with her dog, baking something sweet, or working on arts and crafts. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you for the introduction. Great presentation so far that I think will feed well into this. I'm hoping to give you some more context around how our urban forest is managed and some opportunities you can take advantage of if you live in the city of Denver. So I wanted to start off with just a brief overview of the Office of the City Forester in Denver. So yes, Denver has a forestry office, and we manage all of the public trees. So we have our operations group, our development and plan review team, our inspections team, and then programs, which is where I'm involved in. We have a few different tree planting and removal programs that we operate. We do outreach, education, partnerships, but all of these groups kind of collectively work together to help manage especially our public trees, trees in parks, trees along boulevards, trees in the right-of-way, which I'll get to in a second, to kind of, target different aspects of that management. So I'm going to talk a lot about the right-of-way. The right-of-way is that it's city property, right? It's publicly owned, but in the city and county of Denver, it is maintained by the adjacent property owner. That is just how the code is, for better or worse. And so this graphic shows some different kind of orientations and ways the right-of-way is throughout the city. It can change, and the size of it can change as well. So it varies a lot property to property in different areas of the city. When we're planting the public right-of-way, because it is public property, there's a bit more regulations and kind of guidelines when we are planting in those spaces. So I just wanted to call out one in particular around ground cover that I think is especially relevant for residents in the city. When we're planting trees in our rules and regulations, so forestry rules and regulations, rock is not a permitted ground cover underneath and around trees. That also goes for landscape fabric and artificial turf. All of those types of ground cover, they can be hotter, they can just prevent air and water from getting exchanged with the soil. So we promote mulch. You can do a vegetative, understory plantings, but yeah, say no to rock, say yes to mulch. I just think that's a big kind of sticking point right now with a lot of xeric conversions and desire for that. And then also just wanted to mention with right-of-way tree planting or any type of tree planting, this right tree, right place idea. It's definitely a mantra for anyone who does any tree planting pretty much anywhere, especially in an urban setting. We want to be really intentional and thoughtful about where we're placing trees. Denver is a tough place to grow trees. We have really crazy temperature swings, and we get pretty cold winters and hot summers and not a lot of precipitation. And so when we're going to make the effort of planting a tree, we want to think about its location and spacing from our other infrastructure that we want to keep intact. And also, our desired outcome, the size of the tree, the shade we want to get. So because of that, when we do any right-of-way tree planting, you do need a permit. It's free through our office. It just allows some of our staff to come out and assess your site and kind of make sure you're following all of those spacing regulations and like picking a correct species and things like that. If you utilize one of the programs I'll talk about shortly, that permit process is included in that. Liz touched on some great benefits of trees already, so I don't need to really harp on this. But I did just want to point out, specifically with right-of-way tree planting, I think it can be especially beneficial for climate adaptation. These right-of-way spaces are a bit harsher than kind of like interior yard, right? There's more pavement, there's sidewalks, there's streets. But when we do plant in these spaces and we can shade that pavement is really what's holding in the heat in our urban settings. It's causing that heat island. So if we can be strategic about planting to shade that type of area, we're gonna end up getting more benefit from those trees that we plant. Host of other benefits. I do really like this graphic because I think it kind of shows the coexistence of trees with people and cars and our buildings and how they do play a place, but in an urban setting, they're part of our infrastructure, right? And I think thinking of them as that can really be beneficial. So now we'll get into some programs and some opportunities if you do live in the city and county of Denver that you could take to plant a tree. They all fall under this Be a Smart Ash umbrella. That's kind of our branding. And so we have a free tree planting program and also an ash removal and replacement program. Again, both of these, we only operate in that right-of-way space, but we operate these programs citywide. They're available to anyone who has space to plant a tree or has an eligible ash tree. So our free tree planting program, again, citywide, we plant in the spring and the fall. Our goal is to plant at least 1,200 trees a year. We're always trying to up that number and really trying to focus on low canopy neighborhoods as well. It's a really low barrier, low effort way to get a tree in your right of way. We essentially do all the work for you. So if you say, oh, I think I have space, we'll come out, we'll assess your site, we'll look at your utility lines and mark a location, and then we'll select a species that we think will do well there and have a contractor come out, plant it correctly, mulch it and water it, and then it's just up to you to water it, care for it in the days, weeks, years after. So really great opportunity if you do have space in the right-of-way for free tree planting. And then our ash removal and replacement program is aimed to remove smaller, poor condition ash trees. You might be familiar, there's an invasive insect called emerald ash borer, and it's gonna target all of our ash trees, and it is a death sentence. So we'd rather than keeping this lovely tree here, get it out of the ground. It's not providing us with a lot of benefit, and get something planted in its place. So the program is kind of two-pronged of like wanting to reduce our ash tree population so that there's less host material for this invasive insect, but also wanting to get different tree species in the ground. A diverse urban forest is a resilient urban forest, so that kind of goes with our planting program as well. We're planting all types of species just to improve our resilience to pests, to climate, to weather events, whatever it may be. We do operate this citywide, but it's on an alternate schedule. So we just were on the west side of the city last year, and we'll be on the east side this year. So it'll kind of alternate back and forth. If you're not sure if you have an ash tree in your right-of-way that might be eligible or that you might need to be kind of thinking about with emerald ash borer, a really helpful resource is our public tree inventory, so this Denver Tree Keeper. So this is where we are, the little like yellow dot, and all of those green points are existing public trees, so and those trees in the right-of-way. So you can go to Denver Tree Keeper and type in your address, and it'll populate if you have a right-of-way tree at your house and what species it is. I think it's also great if you're walking around the city and you're like, oh, that's a really cool tree, I have no idea what it is. It's a great resource for that as well, to look up that species, and if you're like, oh, I want to plant that in my yard, you can figure out what that tree is. We also have our approved street tree list, which is a really great reference if you're not quite sure where to get started on what species you should plant. It breaks them down by species and also a lot of different attributes. So size, water requirements, is it salt tolerant, does it flower? So it's a really great kind of reference to use for that right tree, right place if we are wanting to do tree planting, to think about your space and kind of what you might need tree-wise to fit in that space. We're in the midst of updating that at the moment, and it's going to be a lot more user-friendly, and you'll be able to actually filter it by different criteria. So stay tuned for that. It'll be on our website, but still is a great resource in the meantime. So lastly, wanted to take away of what you can do. I think sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming with climate change and climate resilience to be like, well, what can I do? I mean, you can plant a tree, right? Just highlighted a couple of different programs available within the city, and Liz was talking about one of hers as well. And even if you don't live in Denver, a lot of municipalities do have programs. So you can always reach out to our office, and we can often point you in the right direction, but I also recommend you can try and contact your local forestry or kind of natural resources office to see what's available. You can spread the word. Now that you know about our programs, or you know that maybe you shouldn't be putting rock underneath trees, start those conversations, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. If you don't have space for a tree, but maybe your neighbor does, you could let them know. I think a big one that I always harp on is caring for your existing trees. We have a pretty expansive existing urban forest, and all trees in Denver need water, no matter the age, no matter the size. We just do not get enough precipitation for them to exist without supplemental watering. So continue watering your trees. You can refresh your mulch, keeping an eye on your trees if you notice something doesn't look right. Maybe there could be a pest issue or like a stress issue. If you intervene earlier, you'll likely have a better outcome. So I'm trained and I'm like always looking up at the trees and like evaluating, but I think if everyone can do that, our trees will be in a much better place. And then lastly, just helping each other. I do think, Liz touched on this too, like it takes a full community to care for our urban forest on top of our like city run programs and management. We all have different abilities when it comes to watering and capacity and time, and so being able to be like, I can help my neighbor or ask my neighbor to help me, kind of to fill those gaps, I think can be really impactful. So hopefully you can take something away from this and say, oh, I can do that or I can do that. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact tree@denvergov.org. Our programs, this QR code will link directly to the programmatic site. And that's all I got.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I want to offer you all so much gratitude. We're in the Hebrew month of Shvat, and in the Hebrew month of Shvat is actually, in the middle of it is Tu B'Shvat, which is the birthday of the trees in Jewish tradition. And so it was really nice to sort of ground ourselves in current day tree issues especially, and there are some other climate solutions too that were talked about, but thank you so much for being here. Another round of applause for our panelists. I have some questions that I thought about, but before, if we won't have time for those, but if you all, I want to open it up first to see what your burning questions are for these folks. Yeah, maybe should I pass this around?
We have 2 very large ash trees in our backyard. We get them treated every year for the boar. Does the city prefers to get rid of them, or is it okay that we just get them treated?
That is a personal preference. Obviously, you'll need to treat for the life of the tree. So at some point, I think there is kind of a cost-benefit analysis that is individual to each person. So if you want to keep the trees, if they're large and they're healthy and they're providing benefit, then that is fully on board with that. We're really focusing for our removals, less than 12 inches in size, so that's like a tree, this big that has maybe been in the ground 10, 15 years, and it's better probably to, rather than to treat that, to get something else in its place. Yeah.
So the replacement program is just for the trees on the street right away, correct? Not for trees in people's yards?
Correct,
right?
yeah.
Okay. There also is a program called the Park People, and they have a program where you can buy trees. I'm just going to put that out there.
And I know if you look at Cool Boulder's website, there are multiple tree giveaways, but run by different organizations in Boulder.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, really quick though. One of them is you said no rock or fabric, and we have a brand new thing with no grass that we've done, and it's split rock and mulch, trees in the mulch areas. Is there a guideline about how much area that needs to be, not rock and fabric? And then secondly, I'm wondering about fruit trees, either in the right-of-way or we have an area that would, it's right at our house, but shading the sidewalk. How do you feel about fruit trees in those areas? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. So first question about the rock. Ideally, out to the drip line of the tree, you would want that whole area mulched. But I would say, when we're thinking of urban settings, planters and things, a 5 by 15 foot area at minimum would be at least beneficial. But the more, the better. And then for fruit trees in the right-of-way, I love fruit trees. I love kind of the independence they can give us with our food security. In the right-of-way, they can be messy, especially if people aren't harvesting the fruit. So it's not necessarily something we're promoting, but it's also not something that's totally a no-no. So I think it's kind of case by case, and if you contact our office wanting to plant in the right-of-way, we would work with you and figure out a solution for that.
I want to take a question that's not specifically about Denver forestry programs.
And if someone has a specific tree question, you can find me after, and I'm happy to talk through that.
I'm wondering if any of you would take a moment and speak specifically to initiatives that you've got going on in Denver or Boulder that are geared toward people who don't own property. Because I think, speaking of equity, right, there are a lot of us, particularly generationally, who might not have access to that, and who aren't looking at maintaining property. What can we do, and what are you doing to help us, and how does that work?
Yes, hello. I can definitely share some things. We think a lot about folks that don't have their own properties, whether you're a renter. Hi, can you hear me? Okay, so like our sew bag program, a lot of folks that are renters make sew bags and then give those to people that have a space to plant native plants. And Cool Boulder, we emphasize that you don't have to have your own land to be doing this work. We have a ton of volunteer opportunities. All the organizations that we work with have land that they need volunteers to come and help tend. And even if you have like a balcony, if you're in an apartment, you have a balcony, we have some guidelines for turning that into a sanctuary for native pollinators and having a garden on your balcony. So there's tons of ways to get involved, absolutely. A lot of people, most people don't have their own space to work with, so wouldn't let that discourage you at all, yeah.
I got to volunteer this past year at my daughter's school because it was an interface between a school that needed more shade with a public park, and so Cool Boulder was part of helping plant new trees on that property, and we asked for a lot of volunteers. I believe actually Jenny Sandler maybe has helped with that, who's sitting here. All right.
Yeah, I'm not especially knowledgeable. I'm not especially knowledgeable, but I've heard a lot about xeriscaping, and to some extent that seems inconsistent with these lush trees that need to be watered. And I wondered what your thoughts are about that, and whether it's a good thing or not such a good thing, and how it fits in with the idea of planting trees.
I would say maybe add on to that addressing the like non-usable turf law. Dovetailing wildfires and trees and wanting to plant trees and that tension. So all of those, there were sort of three tensions that you brought up, one of them.
I can definitely speak a little bit to the xeriscaping conversation. When done correctly, you think about zones of different plants, and you're selecting like native low-water species, but if you do have an existing tree or plan to plant a tree, that would be kind of a different watering zone. And that would require more water input than some of these other transitions or other xeric spaces. So like if you just have a front yard full of grass and nothing else, it's a really great way to reduce your water use. It has to be done thoughtfully. If you have a front yard with grass and a tree in the middle that has been growing in that grass all its life, you're gonna have to be really thoughtful about ripping all that turf and irrigation out, because then you're gonna cause stress to that tree. There's still ways to do it, but you just need to be thoughtful and mindful about kind of the water requirements and creating zones with your xeriscaping plan. And then the wildfire one, maybe Caroline or Liz.
So at least in Denver, from what my understanding is that there are certain areas that are more prone to wildfire. Mostly like the northeast area where there's places like the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Refuge and things like that, where there's a lot of grassland like that. There's that in terms of just trying to make sure that that area is well maintained. And that's, I think the federal government is in charge of that area. There's also our mountain parks that Denver has that are especially, that we're making sure that are safe from wildfire and that kind of thing. The trees, so I don't want to speak outside my area of expertise, but that's really where any kind of concern would be really for wildfire that I've heard of from our wildfire officials. Just, our homes are made mostly of wood, just like thinking about kind of the way that we construct things. So my sense is that like a tree in your backyard isn't the thing that we would need to be concerned about. What do you want to share anything? I mean, you have to keep, they say there's a certain space between your house and trees that should exist,
You can get $500 right now for full juniper away from your
Yeah, right. Yeah, it depends on where you are. If you're in the highly densely part of Denver versus someplace that's more close to the wild urban interface, they call it the WUI, which is more of a concern.
Yeah, I know in Boulder I think a lot more places in Boulder are closer to that WUI.
Yeah.
And I know there's a tension between the rock versus mulch and all those conversations.
When I came here 25 years ago, there were no mosquitoes, and now we have so many. Can you talk a little bit about your mosquito mitigation and what you're doing to prevent this vector transmigration?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Mosquito populations are rising. Their habitat is expanding because the temperatures are getting warmer. And also some of our land management is very conducive to mosquitoes because they like still water, and with irrigation, farming, things like that can really foster mosquito populations. There's a lot to go into. There's actually multiple species of mosquitoes, and only one of them, which is called Culex, carries West Nile virus. And the rest are just called nuisance mosquitoes, so they'll bite you, but they don't spread diseases. And it's actually really beneficial for the ecosystem to have a mix of those different species of mosquitoes so that they can kind of keep each other in check. And there's a lot of predators that live in wetlands that eat mosquito larvae and adult mosquitoes. So making sure that our wetlands are healthy, it keeps the mosquito populations in check. And it's actually good. Mosquitoes are an important part of wetland ecosystems. And when they're not healthy, that's when the Culex mosquitoes, which carry West Nile virus, can really proliferate because they do better in those degraded ecosystems. And we have a lot of different chemicals we can use that we apply to water to kill the mosquito larvae or eggs. And oftentimes, folks will just treat if they see any type of mosquito larva. But in Boulder, we actually test to see what percentage are the Culex that carry West Nile virus, and we'll only treat if the threshold is above a certain point. So if it's only 10% Culex mosquitoes and the rest are the other species, then we won't treat, and we'll allow the ecosystem to just kind of manage that itself. And we've seen that it's really successful in keeping the overall rates of West Nile virus low and keeping the risk to spread to humans really low, especially compared to surrounding areas that will have higher rates and are using a lot more chemical applications. So it's really interesting, really, really hopeful to see that when we let our ecosystems be healthy, they can protect us and function well on their own. So.
I would love to expand our conversation from Denver and Boulder to the entire state of Colorado. And I would love to hear from all of you, but maybe for the sake of time, Liz, I was wondering if CASR is involved in any long-range resiliency planning efforts across the state.
So we work really closely with the state offices, with the Department of Local Affairs. They have a resiliency office, and the state resiliency recovery office. Yes, I guess is a short answer to your question. We work very closely with our partners across the state, and actually regionally, with our tree planting effort, we've coordinated with other groups across the region, because we're all looking for trees, and all if it's hot here, it's hot other places, right? If there's flooding here, there's likely flooding in our neighbors' yards too. So we're working very closely and collaborating often.
If I can, I'll add a quick thing. The program that I'm in, the Civic Spark AmeriCorps program, there's other fellows in Colorado. They're not focused on nature-based solutions specifically, but we have fellows with the city of Grand Junction, Steamboat Springs, Crested Butte. I think those are the main ones that are outside of like the Front Range area, but just to mention that there's a lot of great work going on in other communities outside of the Front Range.
We also been meeting with a group called C2ES, which has been collaborating, Front Range groups really talking about wildfire, talking about extreme heat, and we're doing one with resiliency hubs. So we've been working really closely with our partners on specific topics too, not just broadly, but trying to troubleshoot and learn from one another.
Can you all mention before we finish up the importance of, or like expand a little bit more on the importance of biodiversity in building a climate resilient landscape? We focused a lot on trees, but just to touch a little bit more on that.
Me? So I think that there's so many reasons why biodiversity is important. Everything from, you were just giving a perfect example with mosquitoes. Ugh, I don't really like mosquitoes, but it's good to know that sometimes they can be helpful. You know what I mean? There's a lot we can learn from having a biodiversity, having biodiversity. Just think about the kinds of things that we learn from the rainforests, right? And all these different creatures that can help cure cancer, and all, so there's medical benefits to biodiversity. There's psychological benefits to biodiversity, like seeing that cute little ladybug and that butterfly, and as you're walking by in the morning, that can bring all sorts of joy. And then it helps all of the different creatures that depend on them as well. So there's also pollinators, right, that help our food supply. Those are just a few things that I can think of on why biodiversity matters, but then also just kind of our moral obligation of Tikkun Olam and the Garden of Eden and protecting all of nature's creatures. So yes to all of those different things.
I think Lauren had a great point too with mentioning that we're trying to get our urban canopy to be more diverse because that makes it more resilient to things like pests, climate. We're facing more and more of these threats, and ecosystems that are more diverse are more resilient because there's not just, if there's one species that will get knocked out by extreme heat, then the whole thing is done. But if there's all these different species and maybe one of them will not do well if it gets hot, but the rest will kind of still keep functioning, a diverse system is more resilient. I think that's the main thing. And trees are awesome, but something I didn't know growing up in Denver my whole life is that there wouldn't really be trees in the Front Range. We live in the plains, and most of the trees that are here, except for like cottonwoods around the rivers, we have planted. And it's really important for urban living and all the people that are here to have this canopy, but it's not the natural state. So I think thinking about native plants, which have these really long roots that go into the soil, really important for holding moisture, for giving habitat to the amazing insects that live here. We have over, I think it's like 1,000 species of native bees, pollinators that live here. And you can find them all throughout the city if you look for them. So I think supporting the whole ecosystem will make us more resilient. Yeah.
That was great to end on. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Liz and Lauren and Caroline for coming. And our session is over. I think the next thing is lunch. B'tei Avon.